As I stand here today in Jerusalem, we mark a little over a year since the horrific massacre perpetrated by Hamas against Israel. Since the horrific events of that day, Israel has worked systematically to achieve total victory over Hamas. It has eliminated over half of Hamas's fighters, dismantled the terrorist organization's 24 battalions, and cut off the tunnels used for smuggling into the Gaza Strip. Significant challenges remain in Israel's Gaza campaign. The return of 101 hostages, the decapitation of Hamas's leader, Yahya Sinwar, and the formation of a civilian government to demilitarize and de-radicalize the Gaza Strip. But while these challenges remain, the focus of Israel's military operations has shifted north. In just the last month, the IDF engineered a series of breathtaking military operations. They remotely detonated thousands of pages held by Hezbollah operatives, took out about 50% of Hezbollah's missile arsenal, and assassinated a swathe of top Hezbollah commanders. On September 27, Israel launched its most audacious strike yet, decapitating Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and several of his associates in an underground bunker. Since that assassination, Israel has launched a limited ground incursion in southern Lebanon, accelerated its bombardment of Hezbollah strongholds in Beirut, and cut off smuggling routes between Syria and Lebanon. The Israeli government has pledged to continue to do whatever it takes to ensure that its residents can return to northern Israel without fear of rockets and raids from southern Lebanon. In this lecture, I want to explain how we arrived at this position. First, I want to outline Hezbollah's origins and its ideology. Then I want to break down the relationship between Hezbollah and the Lebanese political system. And finally, and most importantly, I want to analyze why Hezbollah's collapse has profound strategic implications for Israel, Iran, and the United States. First, let's talk about the origins of Hezbollah. And to do this, we need to understand a basic fissure in the Islamic world between the Shiite minority and the Sunni majority, a division that goes back to the succession over the Prophet Muhammad. In 1979, radical Shiites under the Ayatollah Khomeini seized control in Iran from the Shah, pledging to export their Islamic revolution to the world. Now, Lebanon proved to be a fertile testing ground for Iran to begin exporting its revolution. Since 1975, the country had been trapped in a devastating civil war, pitting the country's Maronite Christians against various internal and external factions, including Syria and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO. In 1982, Israel launched Operation Peace for Galilee, designed to expel the PLO from Lebanon and buttress the Maronite Christian government. To support these efforts, America sent a contingent of Marine peacekeepers to Beirut. Enter Hezbollah. Backed by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, Hezbollah launched two horrific attacks against American peacekeepers. In April 1983, they attacked the American embassy in Beirut, killing 63 people. 6 months later, they targeted the US Marine barracks, murdering 241 Americans and 58 French personnel. Until Israel took out Hezbollah's top commanders in recent weeks, many of those responsible for shedding American blood enjoyed 40 years of impunity. America withdrew from Beirut in 1984, but Hezbollah's radicalization continued, as expressed in its founding charter from 1985. Pledging allegiance to the Ayatollah, the charter concludes, "We see in Israel the vanguard of the United States in the Islamic world. Our struggle will continue until this enemy is obliterated. We recognize no treaties with it, no ceasefires, and no peace agreements." In this sense, Hezbollah shares the fanatical and rejectionist ideology of Hamas. But even more so than Hamas, Hezbollah engages in international terrorism against the Jewish people. These activities span Europe, the Americas, and the Middle East, encompassing suicide bombings, plane hijackings, and international drug trafficking. Just look at what they've done in Argentina, far from the epicenter of the Middle East. In 1992, a suicide bomber attacked the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, killing 29 people. 2 years later, a suicide attack on the Jewish Community Center in Argentina's capital left 85 dead bodies in its wake. Earlier this year, the Argentinian Supreme Court concluded that both of those attacks were orchestrated by Hezbollah with the backing of Iran. So we can see that Hezbollah serves as puppets for its masters in Tehran and pioneers of suicide terrorism. But while its tentacles of terror extend around the world, its base of support is concentrated in Shiite areas within Lebanon. So in the second part of this lecture, I want to analyze the relationship between Hezbollah and the Lebanese political system. Lebanon operates under a constitutional system of confessionalism. This means that it allocates a fixed number of seats in its parliament to various religious and ethnic groups, including Maronite Christians, Druze, Orthodox, Sunnis, and Shiites. By convention, the president of the country is a Maronite Christian, the prime minister a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker a Shiite Muslim. Christians make up about 30% of the country's population, but receive 50% of the seats in parliament and control of the executive branch. This imbalance between demographics and political power is a major driver of sectarian tension and contributed to the outbreak of civil war in the 1970s. Capitalizing on this balkanized political landscape, Hezbollah turned itself into the patron of the country's Shiite minority and exercises effective control over Shiite areas in southern Lebanon, the Bekaa Valley, and southern Beirut. It provisions welfare and subsidizes food for its followers. It smuggles in pharmaceuticals from Iran and assumes control over healthcare provision. It accumulates US dollars and uses this as a buffer against the severe depreciation of the local currency. Since assuming the leadership of Hezbollah in 1992 until his death last month, Hassan Nasrallah was the fulcrum for these activities. A charismatic populist, Nasrallah attracted significant support from Lebanon's Shiite community. Most importantly, he positioned himself as the right-hand man and indispensable ally of Ayatollah Khamenei. In Prime Minister Netanyahu's words, he was the central engine of Iran's axis of evil. But while Hezbollah is popular among the Shiite population, it is widely despised by other groups within Lebanon. An Arab Barometer survey earlier this year found that only 9% of Sunni Muslims, less than 1 in 10 of the population, trusts Hezbollah, and its support among Christians is only 6%. Why is this so? First, Hezbollah is an agent of chaos and disruption within Lebanon. Several of its members were implicated in the 2005 assassination of Rafiq Hariri, a long-serving Sunni prime minister who opposed the alignment between Lebanon, Iran, and the Assad government in Syria. Moreover, Hezbollah impeded investigations into the 2020 Beirut port blast, which left over 200 dead, and it has prevented the parliament from appointing a new president for over 2 years. So Hezbollah is reviled on the domestic scene. But second, it drags the country into repeated civil wars and foreign wars, which serve the interests of Tehran while exploiting the people of Lebanon. Just look at the Second Lebanese War in 2006. On July 12, Hezbollah operatives, militants, broke across the Israeli border, killing 8 IDF soldiers and abducting 2 others. Israel subsequently launched a ground incursion up to the Litani River, while Hezbollah launched hundreds and hundreds of missiles at northern Israeli cities like Tzfat, Haifa, and Tiberias. After 34 days, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 1701, calling for Hezbollah to retreat north of the Litani River and cease importing arms from Iran. In accordance with that agreement, Israel sought for the Lebanese armed forces to assume security control over southern Lebanon. Israel has no interest in annexing Lebanese territory or in governing the Lebanese people. It is not at war with Lebanon, but with Hezbollah. The breakdown of peace, the outbreak of war in Lebanon post-October 7, is the direct result of Hezbollah's disregard for international law. In firing thousands of missiles at Israel, Hezbollah breaks down the basic principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity. In building up a militia of 40,000 fighters, Hezbollah disregards Resolution 1559 of the Security Council, requiring the disbanding and disarmament of all Lebanese militia. And in building up a terrorist infrastructure on Israel's border, Hezbollah makes a mockery of Resolution 1701. So Hezbollah faces significant domestic opposition. It's liable for dragging the country into repeated wars, and it's responsible for the breakdown of diplomatic agreements. How then has Hezbollah sustained its power? In a word, Iran. In 2016, Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah said, "Our budget, salaries, funds, food, drink, weapons, these come from Iran. As long as Iran has money, we have money." End quote. The US State Department estimates that Iran provides Hezbollah with $700 million of funding a year. So when America releases sanctions on Tehran, it means more rockets pointed at Tel Aviv. And this brings me to the final part of this lecture, the strategic implications of Hezbollah's collapse. Because just as Hezbollah depends upon Iran for its sustenance, Iran's strategy against Israel depends on proxies like Hezbollah. You see, instead of targeting Israel directly, Iran has sought to build a proxy network, a ring of fire surrounding and suffocating Israel. For decades, it's maintained a strategic equilibrium with Israel by using its proxy network to deter a strike against Iranian nuclear facilities and other assets. But in the last month, that strategic equilibrium broke down. Hezbollah's missile arsenal has been decimated, its communications network destroyed, its leaders decapitated, facing relentless aerial attacks, the assassination of its leaders and a ground incursion in the south. Hezbollah's ability to invade northern Israel has greatly diminished. And this places Iran in a strategic dilemma. It cannot let Hezbollah fall, but fears the consequences of a wider war with America and Israel. So-called reformers like President Pezeshkian fear the consequences of such a war, while hardliners insist on the necessity of defending Hezbollah and avenging Nasrallah's death. Ultimately, siding with these hardliners, especially in the IRGC, Ayatollah Khamenei authorized a direct strike of ballistic missiles against Israel. On October 1, Iran launched almost 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, forcing 10 million civilians into bomb shelters, including right here in Jerusalem. Now, that missile attack failed to achieve its strategic objectives, inflicting limited damage on military infrastructure and no civilian casualties. But crucially, Iran's brazen attack on Israel provides Israel with the legitimate right to retaliate against Iran. And the IDF has promised a serious and significant response to Iran's attack. At a minimum, this could look like going after air defense systems or ballistic missile facilities. But Israel has not ruled out a more punishing response against Iran's oil refineries or nuclear enrichment sites. It may also go after Iran's leaders in an effort to separate the Iranian people from their tyrannical regime. Prime Minister Netanyahu has pledged that regime change will come to Iran, quote, a lot sooner than people think. For almost a year, Iran was prepared to support its proxies Hamas and Hezbollah, avoiding direct fire from Israel. But Iran's proxies faced defeat on the battlefield, leaving war on the doorstep of Tehran, domestically despised, politically weakened, and militarily exposed. The Islamic Republic faces the spectre of its own downfall.